Good? All right. I believe this is the last talk for Hack3rcon, so thanks everybody for hanging out and before you all drive home, fly home, whatever. So I'm up here to talk about Katana. How many people have used Katana before? Just kind of to get a guide. Okay, so most people are fairly familiar with it. I'm going to talk about a little bit about what it is, but then try to go into some more advanced use cases. So this is a Wielding Katana Pentesters portable PAL, and at Hack3rcon. The format of today, I'm going to talk about what Katana is, some of the components, because it's really a very large framework, how to customize the environment, which was my intent all along, was really to make something very customizable. Some advanced stuff, it's not necessarily that they're difficult advanced, it's that you might not think to use them in this format. And then, yeah, it's a Q&A. Katana, so it's a consolidation of a lot of different tools. It includes a bootable side, which is what most people are very familiar with using. And then it also has a portable applications side, which I'm trying to get the word more out about because I think it's a really awesome thing and you're able to do quite a lot with it. It's a one-step install, so instead of having to grab all of these different tools and bring them together on your own, you'll be able to extract it from an archive file, a zip file, or RAR, or whatever I'm going to end up using for the new version, and extract that onto a flash drive, run the install script, and all of a sudden everything you want is right there on that flash drive. And it runs from flash drive. You can also run it from really any disk that's FAT32. So I say flash drive because that's what I keep in my pocket, but it could be installed on a laptop as well. My motivation behind making Katana was, we all have this. We have the giant case of CDs, DVDs, maybe some people use rocking Blu-rays now, but you end up with all these utilities that you want to keep on your person, especially if you're like a system administrator or really any techie kind of job. So you have that big thing. Some of them are labeled and some of them you burned, you needed them very quickly and you stuck them back in the sleeve and you have to judge by the amount of how much is burned on there what it could possibly be. And also you loan them out, so you end up losing these tools. You have to download the new version and find it and whatever. So that gets annoying. So I kind of wanted everything to be onto this one medium. It ended up being a flash drive, was really good. I wanted it to be useful for multiple operating systems. I kind of wanted this to, again, be a broad spread tool. I'm really kind of a Swiss Army knife guy, so I like it to work in all kinds of environments. Again, keep it in your pocket. If you need it right now, you don't have to go back to the office to get that big bundle of CDs. You can have it on your person or in a drawer or go to, very easy. And peace of mind knowing I can hack at any moment. Basically, okay, I'm all of a sudden inspired to do something, or I'm on site and something pops up, I'll be able to leverage what resources I have on the small flash drive to do that. So the Katana Toolkit is what I call the portable app side. This is 100 plus portable Windows applications. They run out of the box. So the reason I say they're portable is that there's no real install setup thing. All the resources, pretty much all the resources that aren't standard, like Windows libraries and stuff, are on the flash drive and don't need to really touch the host operating system. There's a couple of small exceptions there, but for the most part, that's true. But it's not necessarily that you would say this is forensically sound. Obviously, there might be certain little edits, but for the most part, most of these don't even touch the registry. So they're fairly clean. You're able to just double-click on it and it runs. So it's kind of nice, convenient if you have to do something very quickly. Cross-platform, so a lot of these utilities will run. I say platform, this is the Windows platform, obviously. XP, Vista 7, I assume 8. I just haven't played around with a lot of them there, but a lot of them they're very small and specific purposed applications, so they don't require all these resources, so generally they use the widely available ones. So a lot of them work just right out of the box. You never know what you're going to need. I have a lot of different, I kind of cover the gambit. Some of them are pen testing tools, some of them are networking tools, some of them are general office tools. Just I thought if you're going into sort of a blank environment, I tried to include anything and everything you would need with a security reference in mind. But there's a lot of stuff out there for network administrators or just general system administrators. I want to leverage the existing setup and make it highly configurable. So these are the applications I'm giving you guys, but you could also remove the ones that you don't care about or add new ones in there, and it'll add them into the framework dynamically so that you have this nice menu structure that I'll show you in a second that you can point and click and select everything from. So these are just a couple applications that I put in there. And I mean, a lot of this is just judging, tools that I knew about, that I liked, that I thought would be useful. And so again, I kind of put a baseline in here, but if you have other tools that run in this sort of environment that don't need to be installed on the host system, you can easily add them to this framework. So we have a lot of them. You have like Putty, very useful. Again, being portable, it's kind of cool to have that access anywhere. And so you can see, I mean, I have OpenOffice on there because, again, you might have something you would want to look at in OpenOffice versus, if Word is installed, old version, so that's not necessarily a security tool, but it's going to be going around with you. Especially something cool is like Firefox. You have a portable version of Firefox, which is really nice for browsing stuff. I have a WAMP on there, so you can actually set up a web server on your host system that you're leveraging for whatever purpose, and a lot of other stuff. As you can imagine, AntiVirus frowns upon this, and I'll talk about that a little bit, because there's a lot of things on there. It goes, oh, you have Metasploit installed. Red flag, we don't think that's a good thing. But I'll talk about that a little bit, how to get around that later on. So this is what the GUI interface looks like. I'm leveraging the Portable Apps GUI, which is really awesome. I think the current version looks slightly different than this. But what I did is I broke it up into different folders, kind of the predominant category I thought the tool should fall into. So it's kind of hard to see up here, but I have like antivirus, encryption, forensics, pen testing, general security, and I believe some of these folders have changed recently. So it's just like a normal menu structure. You click on that, and then the tools underneath there are what kind of fall into that category. The cool thing about this is when you install new tools, once you restart this menu, it finds them and adds them in dynamically. So it's really easy to add new stuff. They also have, in the portable apps, in their install, they use a documents directory on the flash drive. So it's really easy to keep your documents and still kind of use this interface on the flash drive, which is, again, a lot nicer way of doing it than having all these CDs or burning a new DVD for all these tools. On a flash drive, you can keep additional files dynamically that you might use resources, a guide or like a hash table or something like that. You're able to just throw on the flash drive and take it with you. The other side, the other main tool, is the Bootable. So these are live bootable distributions. A lot of us when I started this project, it was a weird concept to have a bootable USB flash drive. But over the past couple of years, it's become more and more common, and people are kind of used to that concept. If you're not, you've probably booted off a CD or DVD at some point. Same sort of thing. There's a little bit of configuration in the BIOS sometimes to say, hey, boot order, put USB above that. But otherwise, it's the same sort of setup. So by default, I have 9 different distributions included in Katana. It covers a gambit of the InfoSec, so I didn't want to have a bunch of distributions that were focused on like pen testing or forensics. I wanted to pick one and throw it out there. And I'll talk about in a second that you can actually update them on your own. You can decide you don't want this one, you want another one. And I've been working on ways to make that a little bit easier for the end user. So these are the ones that I have on there by default. Of course, Backtrack, which I think most people end up just downloading this, think it's really cool, and then they only use Backtrack on there, which is fine, but there's a lot more out there that it offers. So again, kind of picked 1 or 2 of the maybe not, maybe my preference are the ones I thought would be popular and people would want. So I picked Backtrack for pen testing. Oathcrack is a live CD that does, as soon as you boot from it, it looks it starts cracking the passwords on any Windows box. So that's got a hash table in there as well. Kane is a forensics distribution, and it was really hard to find good forensics distributions that weren't paid for. There's a lot of them out there, but a lot of them you have to pay for. And another thing with these tools, read the licensing before you use them, because some of them that are included have special like commercial licensing. But for the most part, everything in here should be personal use, free without any duties. But some of the other ones you have to, if you're going to be using them commercially, read their licenses, see if you have to pay some sort of fees. But I don't think any of these have that sort of thing involved. But again, check that on your own. So Kane was really cool. Tails is something I added in recently. Has anybody here used Tails? It's the Tor bootable distro. So essentially, it's a boot and create an anonymous connection to the internet through all the services and stuff. So that's kind of cool. I added that because I think that's something that I like to do personally, is be able to like boot up my laptop into that sort of environment and then connect to a open access point. Something that I don't really, I don't want my information out there, but I want to get on the internet. That's a really nice way to do it. The Ultimate Boot CD, if you haven't used that before, then you're probably not dealing much with hardware, because it's really cool. Just a bunch of these old like floppy disk images that are designed, or really small images that are very specific purpose designed. The Trinity Rescue disk is for hardware recovery. I put Puppy Linux in there because I wanted it to be able to use a low resource environment Linux. So Puppy Linux, it doesn't take a lot of, you could boot it on 128K old Pentium 1 box and it'll run. So a lot of these other ones, can't handle that, but that's a really low resource. DBAN, if you don't know what DBAN is, don't use DBAN. It's Derek's Boot and Nuke. If you use it, you read about it on your own, but yeah, don't use that if you don't know what it is. And then Conboot, which is a really cool way. This is an older one, it's updated versions, but it's a really cool way to bypass authentication on, now it's Linux and Windows. It's a really neat tool to look into. So, and I'm not going to demo this much because it's pretty self-explanatory. This is the menu. This is what happens when you boot, and you just, up and down arrow, select, and you're good to go. I also put a lot of time into trying to include documentation on the project. So as a learning tool, it's actually pretty good because all these different tools, I have a little bit about each one, and then a link to the website where it was downloaded originally and where I added it in. So if you're kind of new to the field and want to see what's out there, the ones that I found, I really tried to cover a large scale, so they're not necessarily tools that people like asterisk log. A lot of these people aren't used to seeing, but they're really neat tools. So if you just want to take a little while and read through that before clicking around and opening applications, it's got a lot of helpful information about each of the tools and each of the distros to play around with. And also some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today about customizing it and configuring it on your own. So some ideal uses. This is a security tool. Where does this come into play? Because if you're, most of us that do pen testing and stuff have at least a VM set up or a hard disk that's set up to do our pen testing stuff. We've got all our cool tools on there. It's already set up. We connect the network and then we go. So some other scenarios where this might be used instead of that normal use case is kind of on the fly. So I mentioned before being able to keep it in your pocket. If something comes up, you can hit the ground running very quickly because you plug it into any computer essentially, and you've got at least the baseline of like backtrack. You might have to update it, configuring whatever, but you've got that on you at the drop of a hat. So I think it's actually probably more applicable to forensics cases because it's not very often you have to do an emergency pen test, but forensics is a little bit different. That's some sort of incident handling or whatever. Sometimes that's very time sensitive. So having something like this on you, being able to do forensics is really nice. I mentioned before with the documentation, it's a really good learning environment. The reason I like it is because there's very little setup, so it's very easy, low entry point, and also there's a lot of tools to play around with, and especially with the live distros, you're not gonna if anything you screwed up, you just reboot it. With the applications, it's a little bit different. If you screw it up, you kind of have to reset them or copy them back over or delete it or whatever. But you're less likely to harm your host system. That's not to say that if you start playing with all these applications that are in there, you won't harm your host system. You might. You need to know a little bit about what you're doing, but it makes it a lot easier. Also, you're able to leverage somebody else's computer, essentially. So you have your flash drive, and it's got all of your stuff on it. You don't need to have your laptop with VMware, VirtualBox, whatever is set up with your pen testing tools and everything. You just go to any laptop or any desktop, plug it in, you've got everything with you, pretty much instantly. So I added a tool to the previous version called Forge, and it was to make things easier on the end user for adding new distributions. There's no great standard way to do this if they're like Ubuntu based or just Debian based or Fedora based. They all kind of have these weird caveats to how you can get them to work in this environment, and the reason is normally all of them have these same folder structures. You have the boot folder, you have the Casper folder, whatever. as we know, you can't have two folders existing with the same name in the same directory. So I had to basically move everything into some subdirectories. And the moving process there is where I have to kind of reconfigure a bunch of stuff. So it can be painful, and it's different for each distro. So I put this together. This is really just a front end for a bunch of bash scripts, because I like bash scripting, and I figured it'd be easier for people to add. They don't have to recompile all this. It's dynamically updatable, and I'll show you that in a minute. But if you say, I don't really like backtrack, I would rather use pin2, you just delete backtrack, and then you can add pin2 this way, and you've got the distros that you really want on there. Applications, it's also very easy. I mentioned before that the portable apps menu is dynamically updatable. So all you really have to do is install an application into, there's a portable apps directory, and this is, when I say the root here, I mean the root of the flash drive. Portable apps directory, and then the root, and then some subdirectory, and then your binary files are going to be in there. And what the portable apps menu does is every time it starts up, so you'll notice sometimes there's a little lag, there's like a little loading menu bar, which is great because the first version didn't have a menu, the loading bar, so it just looked like it was hanging for a while, and they added that in. But it dynamically, it goes through each subdirectory and scans for binaries. And if it finds a new binary, it pops it into the menu. If the old ones, it's already found, it knows where to place them. So the only thing you might have to do is it'll pop up and it tries to decide what menu, what folder, or sorry, a submenu it should go under. But it does, a lot of these applications it's not going to know about. So you might have something that's placed in a weird spot that you can drag and drop and move over to wherever you want it to. So that makes it really convenient to add new ones, and the update process is the same. Some of the tools will auto-update. Think of it just, I don't have any specific backend for doing this auto-update stuff. It's just like, installing tools normally in Windows. These aren't necessarily my tools. I've just put them together, aggregated them. So the update process is either, run their update config or replace the binary or whatever. But this is where you'd put it. And the same thing goes for just using the flash drive instead of using the DVD concept I mentioned before, especially using these live environments. Like if you're going to be in Backtrack, you could actually write a script, keep it on your flash drive, and then once it's Backtrack has booted, access the flash drive and copy over that script for like a setup or automation or whatever. So I think it's important to note there's actually a documents directory that's in the root that gets used by the Katana Toolkit. Oh, I don't want to go all the way back. But you put whatever you want in there, word lists or something, you might want to keep it. Again, I mentioned flash drive is what I use, but you could put it on an external hard drive if you want to use some sort of word list or cheat sheets, documentation, whatever. Just throw it into the documents folder and then treat it just like you would normally. And yeah, you can also access some of the Windows stuff from the live distros, which is kind of fun. So you could actually run some of these tools in Wine if you really wanted to, for whatever reason, booting into Backtrack and using the Katana Toolkit in Wine under a live Linux distro is doable. I haven't really found a great reason to do it, but it's there. And something I really haven't messed around with much is the persistence of live distros. So I know Backtrack has a setup to do that, and this essentially creates a new file there so you can have the live distribution, but you can modify it and it saves it to this new file just so you can treat it essentially like it's an installed distribution instead of some live environment. So the live environment is hard set, so when you reboot, everything's wiped. So I'll just show you a little bit. I don't have any really fun demos, but I thought I'd show you a little bit about how things are structured here. So I mentioned Forge earlier, and okay, so the Forge is, right now it only works in Linux, and it might just continue, because as I mentioned before, it's using bash scripts, and there's no great way that I found to do it in batch. Like there's no native Windows resources, and I looked at using sort of a Cygwin setup, and that might be possible, but it's missing some of the binaries that I need. So you go into this directory, Forge is here, but I've run it from the command line. So it pops up with this error, which is cool, because you need to run some of this as root. So I have a root detection in there to tell you what to do. So okay, now it's up as root. Forge. I want to select, yeah, and I went back, you can kind of tell how long the project's been going on. it's got backtrack 3 in there and some other stuff. But you say, okay, I would rather put a pin2 in there. How do I do that? Well, I've previously downloaded the image. If I don't, I know where to go. I download the image file, the ISO. I point, open up the directory, grab that. The path is to set the path for wherever Katana is installed. So that would be like the root folder for Katana, wherever it's mounted. And then you basically hit install, and it takes care of everything else. On the back end, so I mentioned it's dynamically updatable. First thing it looks for is this configuration file, the list in it. And because I really don't want to be the only one who maintains this, I'd love for people to send me information on either the distros that they're part of or ones they'd like to see added, and then I can just push the update and add it in here. So it's very simple. You've got the name, whatever you want to call it, the version number, because sometimes the configuration, yeah.
What version of backtrack is currently in Katana? Great, because I love 3. There's tools of 3 that I love.
Yeah. So actually with backtrack 3, I think I do a separate install because the way that it works is sometimes they backtrack does these major changes, and it is cool, some of the older versions. Right now I have the beta out right now, and that's got 5R2. By the eventual one, it's going to have 5R3. But I wanted to leave this in there because there are some cool tools in backtrack 3 that just didn't translate over. So that's another reason why you might want to use something like this. So if you can I don't even know where the ISOs are for that anymore. I don't think they're on the website. But if you have it, you could use this to install it. One thing about that, I think there's an exception for some of the backtracks, but the rest of them, they use the same path. So again, you probably have to delete the older version and replace it with the newer one. I'm pretty sure with backtrack 3, I did an exception kind of in that vein. But anyway, for here, you put a name, a version, the URL, description, and the script. So really, the only thing that matters here is the script part, and that tells it where to run the configuration script from. So you can see, to update it, it's pretty simple. So if we go into the scripts directory, you can see all the distros. Go into pin2 and then see, there's an install.sh. And install.sh is the same, every folder has that, and that's the install script. I'm working on an uninstall script, or remove. I haven't decided what I'm going to call it, and it's basically going to be, here's your install, here's your remove. It's going to follow the naming scheme. If it's in that directory, it'll do the setup. They're not terribly complicated. It's a couple lines of basically extracting files, copying stuff over, and then editing the boot menu to add pin2 in there. And again, it's really hard to write a guide to do this specifically because pin2 is Gen2 based, so this sort of works for that version of Gen2. Backtrack is a lot easier now. It's just a configuration file change. But I try to keep this, I'm going to do better on keeping this updated with the newest stuff. But anyway, if you want to add stuff or you have requests or anything, let me know. Or you can look some of these up as examples and try to set up your own. What else outside Forge? So documents directory, keep all your stuff in there. It makes it a lot easier. Portable apps. So this is what it looks like. The nice part about it is you don't have to see all this on the screen. You add something else later on, and it's going to search a directory like this. So you see like the portable apps, FreeDF, it's going to see whatever's in there and then pop it into the menu box. Loading. Documentation, very friendly. The installation setup, the bootable parts, all the different tools that are in there, the toolkit. Yeah, so big red warning. Warning, some tools are going to include in Katana are listed as hacker tools because everybody keeps telling me, so I installed it and then my antivirus went crazy. And I was like, yeah, I did it right. I keep getting that. And I was just like, what did you think this was going to do? Like, it's a ton of tools and they're all, like, not all of them, but some of them are hacking tools. So most of the time it doesn't come with say virus or anything, but it says, warning, the netcat is bad. Like, well, maybe for you. For me, netcat is awesome. So I try to put that in there to tell people. But yeah, you just list through of all the stuff that you want to look at. A little bit about customizing, what I talked about here, setting up your own. So anyway, reading through the documentation that's on this is pretty helpful. And sometimes there's just some issues that come up with just weird things. So I tried to include a little bit of that in there. Let's It's most of what I wanted to show in here. If you're doing stuff with oafcrack and you want to replace the tables, this is the file to do it in. So I'll get back to the presentation part now. Sorry I didn't have any cool, sexy demos, but most of it I really want to convey to people that they have the level of customization they can have from this tool. So my antivirus finally woke up and ruined all my fun. What are some things you can do to stop the evil AV? One thing is to use a right block in software. So in Windows there's a registry key, and I didn't put it out there because I want to keep this down to one slide. I think, even though he just left, I believe on Adrian's website, IronGeek's website, he has a tool or a link or something about how to change this scripted-wise, but it's just a registry key. It's a binary flag. 1 says everything that gets mounted is read-only, and 0 says it's read-writable. So anyway, there's tons of scripts out there that can modify this one, but what you would do is you would essentially flip the bit, plug in your device. It's plugged in as read-only, so AntiVirus is going to go nuts, but it's not going to delete anything. So some of the things you want to run will be okay, and that's the other thing. With AntiVirus, as we know, sometimes deletes these tools or deletes the things that it finds. So you can do that right block. Obviously, in the Linux environment or Unix environment, you can mount it as read-only, so then even if something finds it again, it's not going to be able to delete it. There's a hardware right blocker. I didn't bring my little flash drive up here, but there's with like a micro SD, or sorry, a SD card. You can do, there's a little lock tab on the side, which is nice. So that's like the poor man's right blocker. You flip the tab on there, and all of a sudden it's read-only. I know there are also commercially ones available. Yeah.
You can also use a U3 thumb drive and just make your ISO tools you want, put that on there, and then that's going to be seen as a CD-ROM, and it's not going to be...
Oh yeah, the U3, yeah. So, but that's only working in Windows, essentially.
Wouldn't it work in Linux also?
I don't know, I haven't played around with U3, and I haven't messed with that at all. It's saying that using the U3, you can point it as basically it treats it as a live CD. We'll have to play with that.
We won't treat it as a live CD, because I've yet to be able to boot from the ISO partition of a U3 thumb drive.
Yeah, so that's bootable side, but
it's still readable, or how it's readable, but not writable, so AV...
Right, exactly. That's what it's saying. You can't get to it. The other thing about doing this mode that I should mention, though, because you would be doing this with the portable applications, is some of them won't work. Because some of them, like larger ones like Firefox, has to write to the disk in order to function. But I said that knocks out any of the larger scale ones, OpenOffice and Firefox, that are just these big applications, might not work. But I'd say probably 70% of them will still work. The smaller applications that have one specific purpose just don't have to write files to the disk, and they'll still run. Some of them will complain and still run. Obviously, killing the antivirus, just flat out. If you can find a way to do that, if you have administrative rights or you use an interpreter or something like that to kill the antivirus, that's a big help. Or virtualize it. I'm going to have VirtualBox, a portable version of VirtualBox in here. That will not prevent your tools in the portable apps, or sorry, in the Katana Toolkit from being deleted or whatever, but you should be able to use other tools and their networking resources and stuff to run all of your funness. BIOS restrictions. Some of the BIOSes are very irritating and don't want you to either boot from USB or they have like a password. So I haven't tried all these. Some of these are just I've read about online. But if you can, unplug it, get all the power out, remove the BIOS battery, then eventually, once all power is gone, the BIOS might reset to a default state where you could either not have a password or guess, the standard password. Brute force. There's some tools out there that will brute force the BIOS, or you can just type in again the default ones. There's a really cool live distro called the Plop Boot Manager. And what it does is you boot into it as a live CD, and it can do the redirect to USB for you. So some of the BIOSes, if you can't get into them, will say they'll boot from USB and they'll boot from disk, but they won't boot from they'll boot from CD, disk, and then like USB is the order. If you can't get in to modify that, then you kind of have to go with what they have, and most of them will still boot from CD first because that's how they were installed originally. So you pop this in, and then when it's booted, you can actually redirect over to USB again, and then you can boot into Katana. So the Hollywood hack, what we know, you want to get it done really quickly. You get you get to your computer, and then within 2 minutes, you've owned everything. So what's the kind of stuff you can get in here, use in the toolkit or in Katana to get that stuff done? Conboot, I mentioned before, is really cool. It's basically you boot up in the conboot, it does its thing, you reboot into the system, and you're done. So that's like a 5-minute scenario. The Ultimate Boot CD has, I forget the name of the tool, some password reset.
Solid's password renew.
Password renew?
I think that might be it. Solid's password renew.
Yeah, where it just basically goes into the disk and edits the registry or wherever the password is.
Yeah, this one, I think it may have the capability of doing that. Also, the one I'm thinking of basically installs a service, and next boot, that service automatically creates your new admin account and resets someone else's password.
This one you can modify. Yeah, you can either dump the password to null, or you can specifically say what you want the password to be, because it just opens it up, and as long as, again, the disk isn't encrypted, you can replace whatever string was in there with the new password or blank password or whatever.
Some problems with some applications later on, though, if they had like their own stored password in a sub-application, which used your previous hash to encrypt it. Then
If it's So no, it's not foolproof, but it'll get you on the system. But I forgot what it was, but it's in the Ultimate Boot CD, and again, it's a menu structure, so you can drive down into it. There's in the toolkit, you can dump a lot of passwords really quickly, because a lot of them are again stored in like the registry or in plain text files, or they're very poorly encrypted. There's a lot of applications like Mozilla Passview or Chrome Passview or IE Passview or something like that that are from Nearsoft that so you figure out what application you want, and normally the name of it's going to end in Passview, and you click on it and it just pops up and it dumps all the passwords that are in there. And none of these tools are cracking them. They're all just reversing whatever scheme was being used, so they're very quick. Copy the registry. If you just want to screw with stuff later, you boot into Puppy because it'll boot very quickly, copy over the registry to a disk, and then reboot and leave the system as it was, so then offline you're able to play around with it a little later on. You use something like the glitch plus Katana equals pwnage. So I'd been talking about the glitch during the con and doing a workshop on it and other stuff. I'm not going to go into it too much now, but here's a computer mouse that I've put a USB hub into, and then I've soldered in the glitch, which is a hardware basically attack environment that I can use. And then I've got a micro SD to USB adapter in there. So that's all going in through the working mouse. So it's basically the hub connects to the computer, and then these 3 devices connect into the USB hub. So what the glitch can do is keystroke injection. So the demo that I've given before is you plug this in, you power off the system and turn off the monitor and turn it back on. It's going to boot into Katana, and then you can use the keystroke injection to control what happens from there. So I had it set up to boot into Backtrack and then create a reverse SSH connection back out to me. And that was all using keystroke injection and being able to boot from this live environment. So at this point, I think I mentioned it, but I'm working on, excuse me, I have the beta of version 3 out there. I'm hoping to have the full version out in the next couple months, but I've got some up here and over there for people who haven't grabbed one already. But I'd like to know what people want me to add into it, some reasons for using it, because if somebody says, oh, it's great for this purpose, I might be able to veer things over a little bit to make it, add more tools in this or take them away or configure it in whatever better option. Any way of avoiding AV, of course, we all want to have more knowledge on that, but for this, it's really good because it does wipe out a lot of these tools and then you have to reinstall them, which is no fun. And I've done with the toolkit, I'm using live Windows applications, and I was thinking about Linux or OS X, and there's really not many tools out there that run live in OS X, and for Linux, there's not really a great reason to do it. But if anybody has any feedback and stuff, there's my info, and again, I have these DVDs up there, but that's pretty much it. Do you have any questions from the audience? Crickets? Yeah, got one. Yeah, it's all, you gotta have to copy everything to the root, so it should look like I showed before. Should roughly look like that. No, I get that quite a bit, because people extract it, And then it creates by default, some of the extractors create the subdirectory, and you don't want that subdirectory. You want the root of your flash drive to look like this, pretty much.
While you were standing there, I was thinking about how to ask.
Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't know where to boot from, and a lot of the path stuff gets screwed up.
And for no other reason at all.
Is that it? All right, thanks.